So as I look out, I see my daughter Michaela. She's here today. As many of you probably know, she's a swimmer. She's going to Lindenwood University in Missouri, but she had the fortune this year of making the national team, which during an Olympic year is the Olympic team for synchronized swimming. She got to do a commercial on the Learning Channel. If you've seen those synchronized swimmers making the letters on the Learning Channel, one of those letters is, I think you're the bottom of the T, right? Is that what it is? Yeah, bottom of the T. Well, anyway, the update on her is that the national team there in Colorado, where she was, did have their final cut, and unfortunately, Michaela did not make the final cut. So she was 15, but she didn't get to 12. But let's have a hand for her anyway, because after all, there's always next year, right? Now, at the time, she was also being considered to be a mermaid on the next Pirates of the Caribbean movie, but she didn't make that final cut either. Now, whereas on the first one, there's always next year, there's no next year for that one, right? No. She'll always be our little mermaid, anyway. So, anyway, seeing her reminded me of a situation when I was growing up. I grew up in upstate New York. I don't know how to swim. Does that shock you guys? No, didn't swim. But in the State University of New York at New Paltz, their system, at least when I was growing up, you couldn't graduate from college and get your degree unless you were certified as being able to float. So if you fell in the Hudson River, let's say, on one of the ferries. Anybody remember ferry boats? They used to have those across. Anyway, so the idea was, okay, if anybody falls in the river, at least they're going to be able to float. Okay, so I had to learn how to float. Now, it wasn't a class like a regular class. It was a water safety practicum or some such thing. So there's 4 or 5 classes. And so how that worked was those of us who were unfortunate enough to not know how to swim and we were going to graduate, we would meet that last year, that senior year, and we'd go in there, and there was this older gentleman, and there's this big pool, and so we'd all kind of sheepishly go up towards the water, and the first few lessons where he would tell us what to do with the kickboards, and the basic idea was, trying to remember this, if you fall in the water, first thing you have to do is relax. Have to relax. And then you have to put your head back and raise your feet. At the same time, try to do a thing with your arms so that you're pushing the water this way. So if you do that, then you're naturally going to go up and then go up there. And then if you can stand the water in your ears and going in your nose and so on, and your eyes are able to open, and you realize that you've popped the surface, you can breathe and you can actually survive. So that was the premise. So he would have us doing that and doing that and doing that. So we got to the last 2 classes. But instead of going to the shallow end, he took us to the deep end. He said, okay, you know what to do now. Go ahead. And we kind of look at each other. Go ahead, take the plunge. You, what's your name, Dominic? You go first. So now I had my afro, right, in those days. And as I, out of shame and embarrassment for my manhood, decided to go ahead and take the plunge. And as the water was absorbing into my afro and dragging me down under like a sponge, I thought, I never thought it would end this way. What did I have in my heart? Fear. Yeah. But should I have been afraid? Did I know what to do? At that point, I did. Right? But I didn't want to take the plunge. See, we're all in that place, aren't we? We're all we have things that we know better, and yet we don't want to go ahead and take the plunge. Let's go ahead and I'm going to be looking at the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 12. One of the blessings of opening the Word of God and reading the words of Jesus is He's so wonderful. before we even get into this, if you don't know Jesus, I commend Jesus to you. Jesus is beyond your greatest hero that you could ever imagine. He was able to speak to the storm and calm its raging thunder, and yet speak to a child, speak to you, speak to your heart, and fill you with wonder. He's everything you've ever wanted in a leader. He's everything you'll ever need for your life. He came and he loved you so much that he wanted you to live with him forever in a world beyond what we can imagine. So he died to take our punishment on the cross. He came back to life and said, here, feel my arms, my hands, my side. If you believe in me, though you die, yet shall you live. Not because it happens by itself, but because God has ordained, God has determined that he loves you so much, he wants you to live with him forever in heaven. So when you read the words of Jesus, it's like, think of him as the greatest genius that ever lived, and the greatest hero that ever lived, and the kindest, most loving person that ever lived, and the strongest person, just all kind of wrapped up in one. Don't let this be sort of an academic exercise, okay? Just nod your head like this, okay? This is Jesus speaking. This is Matthew chapter 12, verse 38. Then some of the scribes and the Pharisees said to him, Teacher, we want to see a sign from you. You read that, and a bell should go off in your head, right? He was opening blind eyes, causing the deaf to hear and mute to speak, raising people from the dead, doing all kinds of miracles. And yet the scribes and the Pharisees came and said, well, we want to see a sign from you. What did they mean? Well, the scribes and the Pharisees were the religious leaders of the time. They were under Roman occupation. But the Jewish nation had devised what you might call an underground society. It wasn't underground literally, but they had a synagogue system. And everybody had to be a member of a synagogue. And 10 people made up a synagogue. And so the scribes and the Pharisees were the leaders who penetrated the society and made sure that everyone was taken care of. The scribes were the teachers, the Pharisees were the leaders, the people who gathered the scriptures and distributed them. So they were highly respected, and rightly so.